Bum 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum. All right, I want to talk about my eating disorders again because ever since coming here, I find I eat a lot in a much more hygienic way in terms of eating behaviors and the amount that I'm eating and all the other complexes surrounding eating. Let's hope this video doesn't get age restricted. For some reason, YouTube gets very sensitive every time the words eating disorder is uttered, right? And they age restrict the videos. I think that's wrong. That's like restricting kids from learning anything about sex or about financial habits, right? Imagine, right? The first thing that the kid does when they learn about sex is when they're actually doing it, or they learn about money when they first get a bank account or get a credit card. Or we don't deal with those things that way, right? Now, if I started recording myself engaging in eating disorders, like in an eating contest or some kind of extreme kind of fad diet, yeah, I could kind of see a good age restriction for that, but not discussion about what I'm doing, right? Anyway, let's see how well this one goes. But one thing I have noticed is that I actually have a pretty good eating hygiene when I'm left to my own devices. Where I run into drama is when I have to do it in the context of my working life. Now, I don't even have a very toxic job. That's the funny part of it. What I do have is my work adds restrictions to when I can eat, and that creates a little bit of drama, right? And let me give you an example. Let's say I teach at a community college. Let's say I got a class, like a 3 hour class, right? And sometimes you got to remember, even if I have multiple 2 3 hour classes, sometimes there's only 5 10 minutes in between. I don't want to be eating during those times because uh, anxiety about how much time I have to eat is the last thing I need in order to have a good hygiene with eating. I was teaching at a tutoring center at one point, and my boss was very upset about me eating at the desk. I eventually just ignored him, and I told him, thank you for your concern, but this is better for our hygiene. One time, one time he insisted that I eat in between the students. There's often only 5 or 10 minutes, and it's not very conducive for good eating hygiene, right? So one time I exaggerated how bad it was by making a mess in the break room, and then I just insisted, you know what, I'm going to eat during the class time because that's better than the disaster we had in the break room. And so sometimes at the tutoring center, students often canceled last minute. They showed up last minute as well, and you didn't know when they were going to show up. And one time I thought the student had canceled. Oh, some heaven! I could enjoy my food. And then he showed up like 20 minutes late, just as I'm enjoying my heaven. I became very short fused, right? Let's see. And also at the community college where I teach, well, let's go back to the tutoring center. At the tutoring center, I very seldom restricted. The students technically weren't supposed to eat in the classroom either. I very seldom enforced that, unless the students were making a disaster. Right? I have food allergies. Sometimes other students also have food allergies. I always teach the student to be mindful and don't just be mindful when you're eating something that somebody has allergies to, right? Get in the habit of keeping your food in your area and not dusting your hands all over the place, right? I wish there was a name for that habit. Imagine you're eating chips, Doritos, or chicken tenders, and the dust gets all over your hand, and then you clap your hands vigorously, and they get everywhere, right? If anybody knows a name for that concept, leave a comment. I would love to say, please don't blah, but I never have a name for that concept, right? It's kind of like how we invented a bunch of concepts 5 years ago, right? Social distancing, right? Or what else did we invent during the pandemic, right? Uh, Before then, we might have understood we want to keep distance from people who had a cold or a flu, but we never had a word for that, right? I wish there was a word for the dusting of your. But I always tell my students to be mindful of that. Students would often forget, and then I would, if it's something I'm allergic to, I got to be careful as well. Sometimes I literally, I've developed this really good sixth sense that I can tell if somebody's makes a habit of doing that, right? It's kind of weird. Sometimes I'll sit down next to somebody on a bus or on an airplane or in the hostel, and I look at them. I can instantly get a sixth sense. This is not a hand duster kind of guy, and I'm usually right about that. Yeah, it's a lot easier when you have young kids as well, right? I don't know. I don't know how I'm doing it, but it's kind of like we all have to have a sixth sense of who's, if you're dating, right, who's safe to be around. We all just have it, right? You can't really explain how it works, right? But the students would dust their hands off, and even if it's not something I'm allergic to, I point it out to them because I want them to get in the habit of not doing that, right? And then my boss would get really upset, and he would come up to me and say, "Andrew, I told you not to. Just don't allow the students to eat there. Then you don't have to worry about this problem." I got a little bit of a problem with him saying that. Just so it's easier to not eat compared to not dust your hands after you eat, right? That's like telling somebody, instead of watching your social distance and putting on a mask, to don't even leave your home, right? It kind of has that vibe to it, right? Like, how about you leave your home and practice good precautions, right? And that always bothered me, the way my boss said it. Like, not eating was easier than that's the kind of mentality that has destroyed our country, right? It's easier to avoid a conflict than it is to actually solve problems, right? That's why do you think so few innovations happen in the United States? Oh, just don't worry about it, right? But so part of the reason that it's been easier for me to eat better here when I'm on vacation is that I'm always at liberty to eat, right? So I can, if I'm not hungry, oh, I'll just, I'm not hungry, right? I don't have to eat, right? When I'm working, I have to think, I got a 4 hour class coming up, right? I can't just wait until I'm hungry to eat, and that really disturbs the eating behavior. And I think that's wrong. I think we as a society should treat eating like it's a basic human right, and we shouldn't limit people, right? So any workplace that disallows you to eat in the office, I think that's against good public policy, in my opinion. Unless there's a really good reason. If you're working with dangerous chemicals or biological dangers, or you're right. Unless I'm trying to think what other good example there is. Unless you're working in some kind of environment where you really need to keep things clean, or you're developing some kind of pharmaceutical, right? Unless there's a really good reason beyond the fact that, oh, we have to face customers, right? There has to be a good health or safety reason. Other than that, I think eating should almost be treated like a basic human right, right? And just like if you needed to go to the bathroom, if I need to go to the bathroom during the middle of a 3 hour lecture, I'm not waiting until the end of that lecture, right? I mean, I'll be a little bit more mindful and go before I go into the lecture, right? But I'm not going to wait just because I'm in the middle of a 3 hour lecture, right? And I think we should, as a society, should treat eating like that. I wish there was like an eating strike where everybody disobeyed no eating policies at once, right? That way, two things, right? First, it will take back some control. And number two, it will go to show the world that, hey, eating at our desks is not the end of the world, right? A lot of people seem to have this black and white mentality that, just like my boss, Andrew, just don't allow them to eat, then you won't have to worry about that. Yeah, I'm trying to do the lighter of the restrictions, and I think these kids can learn a thing or two, right? I thought during the pandemic we had so many rules of thumb, right? Social distance, wearing a mask, washing your hands, don't touch your face. I thought that would be a good opportunity to learn about how to eat in a hygienic way. We missed the opportunity, but you know what? I think part of the reason we didn't learn about that was because if people actually slowed down and ate in a more mindful way, I think people would eat a whole lot less if they had to think before they ate. Right? I distinctly remember when we were wearing masks, it put one extra step before you could eat, and sometimes even just that split second could mean the difference between giving into a craving and I can wait, right? And any friction between you and your food is sometimes a good thing, by the way, right? This is the Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum.